because Zeus, of course, is a philanderer par excellence. Pretty weird stuff. Especially since he liked to transform into different animals for the occasion. So he's a bull in some, he's a swan in others. I have no idea why artists love to paint Zeus as a swan more than, you just look them up and you'll see, and it's kind of erotic, I suppose, but hey, hang on. You want to see a few? No? It'll wake us up, I suppose. Let's see, swan, and it's the rape of, who did he rape as a swan? Leda. So you get all kinds of artists trying to figure out what it might look like to have a swan with, I don't know. That's interesting. Even contemporary, so it's like still a thing. But, okay. Okay. Well, so let's run through some of these folks. Thales is the first, around 6th century BC. Everybody knows what BC stands for? What? Before Christ, right? We've changed it now. It's BCE, which stands for
Before Common Era.
Before the Common Era, which makes AD CE, the Common Era. Which it's kind of ridiculous, but it was one of those attempts to church and state separation thing. Well, I guess, I don't know who came up with that. But in any case, so 600 BC, roughly. Anaximenes was the very next generation from Thales, and Anaximenes argued that the arche should be air. Because even though you can find water in every life thing and theoretically dry dust came from mud. Mud was water. So it possibly could have come from the water. I don't know. But Anaximenes argued that air was thinner, and so that should really come first. You get Anaximander, who is not really one of the favorites of his day. In fact, I think they killed him because he came up with the concept of the infinite, and the infinite causes lots of headaches in people that try to figure it out. I don't know if anybody studied the infinite for fun. If you're interested, a little. My favorite book on the infinite is by Wallace, and that's Everything and More. And it's fascinating. So and funny, by the way. It is hilarious. So if you like reading math books, that is a hilarious math book. So I don't know how many people like math books. How many of you have a favorite book that's a math book? Really?
Kind of. I mean, it's like vaguely related to math.
I just saw on Facebook this morning a post that said that they decrypted or translated a Babylonian tablet that shows that they were doing geometry or something at 3000 BC, like way before the Greeks, and they were doing it in base 60 because the Babylonian number system was base 60. So, fascinating. Okay. Heraclitus. Hera and Clitus means the glory of time. Because Hera is time, and Clitus means the glory of. So Heraclitus, and his arche is fire. And what he seems to have meant by that is everything is change. The basis for everything is in constant change. And I don't know if my links work still. Maybe they do. Oh, no. So some of those are so old that they're no longer connecting to anything. But you could look up Heraclitus and find all kinds of stuff. Now you don't need me to give you links for it. One of his most famous quotes is Panta Rhei, which means everything flows. You might have heard you can't step into the same river twice. That's not the same river the second time you step into it. In fact, today we might even point out it's not the same foot that you stepped in anything either. Everything's constantly flowing, right? Anaxagoras says that everything is based on atoms, which is literally uncuttable, right? A means not, and tom means cuttable, so not cuttable. We still use atoms. Now that we know that you can, of course, cut them, we should have changed their name because it's Greek for uncuttable, and obviously we can do all kinds of things with the subatomic. So, and he clearly thought that atoms were the smallest particles. You couldn't get smaller than that. That's why he called them uncuttable, basically. And nous, which is mind, is part of his explanation of things. Pythagoras, you're probably all familiar with. He's the one that stole all of his information from the Egyptians. Josephus, who's one of the Jewish writers of the time, complained about it and said that he stole it from us. So that's fun. But Pythagoras, we think of the Pythagorean theorem, the table of the 10 opposites, a whole bunch of things are associated with Pythagoras. And Pythagoras, by the way, had a secret society. Everyone says he did. And that's odd because pith means to speak out, and agora means the marketplace. So it seems like his name means just the opposite of having secrets. Parmenides argues that the one is the arche. Oneness, whatever, or the monad. And Paramenides is, I think, three parts. Para means two, mena means unchanging, and ideas would be the third part. So you end up with two unchanging ideas. Why is that interesting? Paradoxes, which means two. Doxa are things you have to believe, right? So you've got two beliefs that you have to have, but they're in conflict with one another. And when you look at Parmenides, you get the problem with the one and the many. Everything is one. And yet at the same time, everything has many parts. And I was like, how can you do that? It's either one or it's parts. No, it's both. So, headache, severe headache. Zeno was one of Parmenides' followers, by the way, younger man, and also famous for Zeno's paradoxes, right? So you get, the idea of Achilles shooting an arrow at a target. In order for the arrow to get there, it has to go half that way, then half that way, and half that way, ad infinitum. And of course, you can never cover all the points. So theoretically, the arrow can't move. There's no explanation mathematically for movement. I think it's still that way. So that's kind of interesting. And a problem for Parmenides. Empedocles gives us fire, earth, air, and water. So he puts four of them together and gives us four different particles that literally explain everything. And that stuck with us for quite a long time. In fact, if you read Shakespeare, you have to understand that Shakespeare believed in those four humors, and so you get characters that are exemplifying those humors. For example, Ophelia in Hamlet is just leaking all the time, right? she's crying, and she drowns at the end of the play, right? You know, so water, she's got too much water, Ophelia. Fiery Hal has too much fire in him, and so he's too courageous, and he gets into trouble and so on because he's too fiery, right? Air, you have Falstaff, you know, who's the big windbag that pals around with Hal, Henry V, right? And you get him making all kinds of speeches, he's heading into the battle and it says, courage, sends me on. Oh, what if courage picked me off when I come on? What is courage? A mere word. And what's a word? Air. Well, I'll have none of it then. And he runs the other way. Too much air, right? And too much earth. You get too much earth. You get Cassius, I think. Is it Cassius? One of the ones that kills Caesar. Caesar doesn't trust him because he looks like he's constipated, basically. He's got too much earth. You have trouble going to the toilet, etc. They almost killed, actually they succeeded in killing George Washington when he rode around Mount Vernon after he retired, of course. He got sick, probably had pneumonia, and the doctor came and took blood from him. And the idea of taking blood from somebody to make them healthy, besides being absolutely dumb, was based on the idea that if you have these four humors and you're ill, what it might be is that you have the humors out of sync. And so what you should do is take some of the blood out of a person and that'll bring them back into harmony. That's really dumb. Don't do that. It doesn't help anybody. In any case, they killed George Washington doing that. So as late as George Washington, 1820, sometime around there, they're still believing in the four humors. So that really lasted a long time. Democritus also believed in atoms. He's considered an atomist. And then we have sophists, and the sophists Sophia means wisdom, and the sophists were teachers. They went around and taught mostly young men for money. And what they were teaching was primarily to teach them how to argue successfully so that they could be good politicians. So, this is real quick. Just kind of an update on a lot of their interests. Their interest was primarily in the RK, what's the building block. Today we have the Standard Model. Everyone's familiar with that through chemistry or wherever, science. Standard Model. Yes? Okay. So we have something very similar, except there's a lot more particles involved and so on. Plus, I'm sure they're a lot smaller than what the Greeks imagined. Plus, the Greeks really thought the smarter ones thought the world was round. They didn't think it was flat. Some might have thought that it was a round disc, like a plate, with a lid on it. That was the sky. But people like Aristotle and Ptolemy clearly thought of the world as a globe, and they measured it. They used an interesting geometrical technique to try to figure out, from measuring it in two different places at the same time. I don't know how they did that. They didn't have clocks. But they used the sun and tried to get angles and so on, and came like within 400 miles to measuring the size of the Earth at the time. So that's pretty interesting. They did think that the Earth was the center of the universe. Pretty easy. It's true, isn't it? You look around and you can see everything goes around us, right?
Center of ours, I guess. Right.
Well, I mean, what's the center of your universe?
Maybe not the planet itself, but me.
Yes, exactly. When we think about things in that sense. I think Einstein's space-time cone, right? There's a picture of the space-time cone, right? And it just means, well, you're here, you're at this point, and this is now, right? And you're going through time probably in this direction. I didn't put the hand there. You're probably going